Today I'm talking with Eric Broughton. I'm super excited about this. This is probably one of the first people that I know that has actually had over 3 exits, successful exits, and is working on his 4th. So Eric has got an interesting story about how he went from working after college into consulting, from consulting into his first startup being sold to RealPage, and then just continuing from there the success. And so I'm super excited to bring you this story and his experiences. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Eric Broughton. Okay, well, today I'm going to talk with Eric Broughton. So welcome, Eric. I'm super happy to have you here and talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey. You're the first person I think we've interviewed with 3 successful exits under your belt. So welcome.
Great. Thank you very much, Todd. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So kind of digging into this, you've done a bunch of startups and you've had a bunch of success, but I'm curious about going from college to some of the jobs that you did kind of post that. And then tell me about how you transitioned to doing your first startup and why.
Yeah, absolutely. So South Dakota School of Mines, technology, right up there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, we have that. Graduated from tech, and it was, I think right out of the gate, it was where my decisions were lying. Where do I choose which path to go? And I had opportunities, like a lot of tech grads from Boeing to, Northrop Grumman, Microsoft, other bigger. You went the Microsoft route as well, and a lot of these bigger opportunities. Actually, I did not have an opportunity at Microsoft. I should clarify there, but I had a lot of bigger opportunities in different companies. But the one that struck me was this with Cargill Steel in North Star Steel, Arizona. And why it was exciting is because it was a brand new steel mill built in 1995. And and the fact that all the technology was still in transition and really becoming a new steel mill. So that was a concept to me that drew me there. And so my wife and I moved to Kingman, Arizona to start our career journey. And that was probably the first thing, is just making that decision to go where the technology had just begun.
Okay. And so then as you were there for a while, what made you want to go do a startup? How did you kind of just get into the corporate gig and you said, hey, I can do this and I've got an idea for a startup. And, you did your entire kind of startup career has really been in kind of real estate. And so how did those two pieces go from an interesting opportunity right out of college to, hey, I should do something in real estate in the startup world?
Yeah, it took a lot longer before I went into the entrepreneurial world. So I should probably take a step back. I'm at the steel mill. I'm an electrical engineer by education, and I go into the steel mill as a plant engineer. I'm working the floor. I quickly move up, and I have a department. And we had 4 shifts. So here I am, 22 years old from South Dakota School of Mines, and managing people that were everything from 25-year-olds to 65-year-olds in this desert environment. And let's just say there wasn't exactly the same work ethic as South Dakota. There's some Arizona mindset was a little bit different at this time. So that was kind of a culture shock for me. But one thing I was able to do is get some of the technology, because I did internships as well leading up to that. And I was able to use some of the technology to reduce our changeover times. So it was about a 15-minute changeover to go from maybe 3 rebar, size 3 rebar to 4 or 5 or 6 size rebar. So making those changes. And by having the programming, working with the technology team to move our setups into a database and then moving them back for certain perfect environment setups. Before they were printing them out and putting them on screens. And then I was able to get that built up until the point where they said, hey, Eric, do you want to be our IT manager? I said, well, let me think about that a little bit. And I can be covered in steel dust every day and shower before I go to bed, or I could be that guy that sits up in the office and says, you know what, let's make the bits and bytes go here and there. And that was a lot more, I would say, enjoyable from that perspective. But I was still able to actually see things happen. So I'd make technology changes, and because we integrated directly with our programmable logic controllers on the plant floor, I can see them go from a database on down, and I could use kind of both sides where I'm out in the plant. So that's where I really started in the technology side, and it was mostly Oracle. And I had 4 books on my shelf that were Oracle books, and then I got this call from this recruiting company, and 2 of the books on the shelf were written by this company called Tusk, the ultimate software consultants. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is, to me at the time, that was like McKinsey and Company of Oracle Consult. Like these guys are reaching out. So I just leapt at the opportunity and moved to Chicago. So it still hadn't had my entrepreneurial roots. I had entrepreneurial, and that was kind of an exciting project I did even at North Star Steel or Cargill Steel. Is that we had an electric arc furnace, and that electric arc furnace, you're arcing electricity across to melt down the steel, and that was probably it's equivalent to about 25,000 homes, about 50 megawatts going into this vat melting down the steel. And by collaborating and networking, I was able to learn that we had an energy division at Cargill that bought and sold energy. And this is during kind of the Enron energy crisis when they were just taking advantage of the West Coast. And this is an Arizona property. We were able to figure out how to, whenever there was downtime in the mill, they would pop up on the mill operators or the electric arc furnace operators monitor and say, yeah, let's drop this down. We're going to be down for 3 hours or 4 hours. We would send a message to Cargill corporate and sell that electricity in the open market. And we made more money selling electricity in the summer of '99 than we made selling steel. So that was just kind of like that.
That's crazy.
Okay. Yeah, there's more to this. And that was going to help. So I would call that like my entrepreneurial journey.
Yep.
And had some more like that. And then went on to Chicago, had some great projects. Northern Trust, I was a data architect for their wealth management platform. That was fascinating, seeing like the Bush family or the Gretzky family. And biggest thing was I was learning like how much money people make while they sleep by these sweep accounts. Like, oh my goodness, how does this happen? South Dakota kid, I'm like watching them make more money than I make in a month, by just like, I'm just going to take this money from this account, put it in this one and earn interest a couple days until I want to do something with it. Yeah, exactly. Or trying to data architect like, their artwork or horses or, their cars and put that into their net worth. It was pretty fascinating. But my favorite project was Archipelago. It was ArcaX. So a group of entrepreneurs bought the Pacific Stock Exchange. So you've probably seen that movie with Will Smith. It's Pursuit of Happiness, where he's sitting in the steps. And this group bought that and brought it all online in Chicago. And that became the foundation, actually, even still today, for the New York Stock Exchange. I was able to work with Steve Rubinow, who was the CIO of ArcaX at the time, and he became the CIO of New York Stock Exchange, and was able to do some really cool projects there. So it was just fascinating. And through the course of that experience, then another little transition is I was hired away by one of the executives at Tusk who left and said, hey, Eric, you've been doing great with projects and technology, but you also seem to be the guy on projects that get like the next contract and always seem to add on more consultants. What are you thinking about going and starting this division for me and like a general manager almost, like a global consulting, global fractional use of database administrators and consultants? And I said, that sounds pretty exciting. So that's when I left Tusk to join IT Convergence. And I was the global solutions manager and built up some projects. I even came back to South Dakota and worked with Gateway a little bit and had some clients in the area. But that was where I really cut my teeth on sales. So I was very fortunate, even before my entrepreneurial journey, building up this muscle of innovation, and then understand the sales side of it, understanding the value of EBITDA and revenue and AP and AR and all these accounting terms and managing groups even before. And I think that laid a good foundation for me, which led me kind of that entrepreneurial journey. Is I also became president of Chicago's Oracle User Group. Okay. And that's what really, by raising my hand and saying, yeah, I'll take part in that and volunteer and run in that group, I was able to land a meeting in the Sears Tower. It was so cool. And I was able to get, Sears Tower, basically, I had 4 sponsors paying for this thing, for the room as Chicago Oracle User Group. And I had some great speakers. And then there's a company, Amley Residential, AMLI, was just bought by Morgan Stanley Real Estate for about $2.5 billion. And they're a big Oracle shop. And they had all this real estate assets. And their CIO just happened to attend my meeting, saw how I managed it, saw what I was doing, that I knew the business side, the technology, and sales, I guess, a little bit. And he said, hey, we were just acquired by Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley has asked us to create this consulting entity within Morgan Stanley Real Estate, $100 billion assets under management. He said, I understand real estate. I've had to use consultants for this Oracle stuff. Would you be interested in partnering with me and building out a consulting arm, like an entrepreneurial consulting arm within Morgan Stanley Real Estate. I thought this is the coolest thing I've ever heard. And this is probably around 2006, and jumped on board, started doing some cool projects. But then, Safeguard self-storage, we retrofitted all the different environments. And I get fascinated by this stuff, like start geeking out, because we started to figure out how you have your elevator bank. And we said, hey, we should do revenue management and just charge like $1 more as you're close to the elevator, because the further you get from the elevator, the more painful it is. So you should charge more for closer to the elevator. Just things like that, little revenue management things. Start building those out. But then the financial crisis hit, and that's where this is like 2008. And we could kind of sense it in advance. We were supposed to go to China, and we were supposed to work with 25 different other companies and start to take our real estate technology. That got delayed 3 months. Then it was delayed another 3 months, and then things just went crazy in 2008. So they really feeling that and where Morgan Stanley wasn't even sure they were going to be a business pretty soon. Changed their charter, and really had to wear that entrepreneurial hat then. And a couple things happened. One, I went back to my Oracle roots, and I landed a large project with the Port of Oakland. And this kind of goes back to people that are hopefully watching. It is really about the grind and the hustle. When it comes down to it, you just have to figure it out and persist and persevere and get it done. And this is one of those situations. Could have went, what, life sucks. I'm going to go, put in my resume on, at the time, Monster, and go work for some corporation. Or I said, let's figure this out. Landed a nice project, Port of Oakland, but then also said, let's create a product. And that's what we did. Is we created our first platform was called Yield Vision. And it was a data warehouse. And also so happened about 6 months earlier, Mark Benioff was in Chicago, and this is when Salesforce was still kind of pretty nascent, And they had this luncheon. I'm not gonna say like me and Mark Benioff and 3 other dudes. It was like 60, 40. Yeah, exactly. We hang out, we surf together. No, it was about 40, 50 people in attendance, but it was still impactful because you hear this guy talking about this software as a service concept of just, it sounds so simple now. Yeah, do a subscription. It's so, and at that time, and I just come from that IT convergence where I was providing a database administrator for 40 hours a month, or a developer for 40 hours a month. And I thought, okay, why couldn't you do this from a software perspective? And this is way before the cloud. This is kind of, maybe we have an outsourced data center. And so that really struck. So the first thing we tried to do was a data warehouse with that kind of software as a service concept. And it was a great idea, excellent platform. The problem was our market, product fit, not the market fit, because real estate people do not want to pay $250,000 for you to map out your data sets. They want it to work out of the box, and they want to pay fractional, and they can pass it on to their asset owners. And that was not the case here. So we sold about 3 projects. Wasn't enough. We just kind of let that sit for a little bit. But then what we did is, because we were building this data warehouse, we're able to see where the first real estate entities to return was going to be multifamily apartment buildings. But we were also able to see that a big gap was marketing dollars. We saw these huge swings of marketing, some properties paying tens of thousands of dollars a month, some $1,000 a month. And we said, look at the revenue per unit. What's the difference here? And we started asking questions, and no one really knew. So we said, okay, let's figure this out. And it's commonplace now, but we were one of the first ones to actually take every ad, and we put in our little one pixel trackers. So every time it was drawn, it kicked back to us. We'd have unique phone numbers for every unique email addresses for each one. It sounds so silly, but apartments.com, rent.com, Craigslist, all the different names that were going wild at that time, they didn't know which one worked. So they'd be like, oh, the apartments.com guy brought in bagels. We're going to go that $1,500 a month per property. You're going, how do you know? And it was crazy. So we started to give them these data sets. And a lot of times it was Craigslist actually that was winning for these guys, and they didn't even know it. So all this real estate data, and that was like a true entrepreneurial, figure things out, create it, and then really that flywheel. You read the Good to Great book, and that flywheel is true. You're just like pushing so hard to get it just moving. But then once it starts rolling, boom, that gets pretty fun, and you can just feel it, momentum kicking up. And that was more of a true entrepreneurial journey for that platform.
So that's kind of interesting. I mean, I guess the takeaway to this is you really leveraged some consulting engagements to find kind of the problem, and then basically
Yeah,
said, is this problem something that lots of people have, and can we turn it into a product? And I think that's kind of
exactly.
unique because I think there's a mentality of billing hours versus building product, right? And I think that,
Yes.
there's very few, I think we've all kind of seen consulting companies that they don't build product very well because they're
Right.
always in the mindset of billing more and more hours. And so that's kind of
Hmm.
interesting that you kind of pivot from, I see an opportunity with a large client that I can turn into something
Yeah.
that's a repeatable product and then generate recurring revenue at a time where that was kind of unique in general. And so
Oh, yeah.
talk a little bit about the 6 years of doing that. Your exit was to
Hmm.
RealPage. And so,
Yes.
I'm sure that was a lot of work, but
Hmm.
tell me a little bit about just kind of the growth in that from having a product and understanding the market to an exit
Yeah.
with, a pretty large organization.
Yeah. It was such a exciting growth period, even personally, professionally,
I
on
bet.
so many levels. Building up a team. We were up to about 55 employees at one point, uh, and even having your own office. It was really an exciting time.
Yeah.
And it was really collaborative, and we definitely didn't have work from home. Maybe a couple of Fridays, but we did things like get everybody together, maybe a beer cart Thursday. One
Yeah.
of the guy walks around with a Captain America mask, and
Yeah.
you get
That's
everybody
awesome.
together and have good times. Yeah, exactly. White elephant at Christmas and different things. And I would love my favorite environment was lunchtime. Actually, we would just and we built such a trusting environment. We'd have some people explaining concepts of their religion or where they grew up. And I'll never forget, we had two employees from China, and one grew up in the country and one grew up in the city, and they had such different perspectives. One was part of the Communist Party and one was not, and just having that, and then I really miss those conversations. That was pretty enjoyable, having that and building up that crew right in downtown Chicago. And the other thing we were able to do was that we got a great space. So another thing about just being in the hustle and talking to a bunch of people, found out that there was this gaming company that lost their contract for Tony Hawk. It was when they had those skateboards you could jump on, and
Yeah.
it sensed that they lost their contract. We're able to scoop up their office space, just pennies in the
Oh,
dollar. So we got a beautiful space. It's a 32nd floor. You know, Again, some South Dakota kid. I'm in the corner office. I'm looking at Daily Plaza at the Thursday. I'm like, oh, this is pretty
this
sweet.
is how we
You
roll,
know.
baby. This is
Yeah,
how we roll.
exactly. That's what we do. It was good times. It's definitely something to write home to mom about, and take some pictures.
What do you
So
think,
that
though,
that
from
was
a
great.
culture standpoint? What you're kind of
Mhm.
describing is building a culture, I think,
Yes.
and I think as an entrepreneur, the first one is always kind of a little bit strange because I think you don't know what
Yeah.
culture is. You know what you value, and you know
Hmm.
what you're trying to espouse. And I think as you add people, you maybe kind of organically add people that are kind of like your culture. And I think it takes you some period of time to realize, okay, well, I'm getting to the point where I'm interviewing people that maybe don't have the same cultural fit, or I'm moving to the next
Yeah.
startup and I have a more clear idea of what I want to do. So tell me what the role of kind of culture played in that.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Very, very insightful. And that building up the culture, and definitely when you hit plateau, when you're at 5 people, different mindset, and then you're at 10, different mindset, and you're still. Then that about 20 to 25 is when you can't really talk to everybody every day, and you start to get different. And then it's so important to have from 5 to 50 and above. That's where it's like it's your managers, people that you hire, are really creating a culture that you don't see on a daily basis. So you kind of have to, but they're also taking cues from you.
Yeah.
So you're spot on in that what you do, what you say, and really what you measure and how you reward people, that flows up and down. And you can't please everybody. It's never going to work that way. So you have to figure out what that path is, and then also relatively still young, early
Yeah.
30s
Hard to know.
at that time. Yeah, still
Yeah.
learning a lot about how to work with people. But I think the thing that's never goes out of style is integrity, doing the right things, treating people with respect, honoring all these. We'll go through HR laws and things, but That's just common decency. So as long as you do those, what should be basic foundational things, then on top of that, you build your business culture, which is we do valuable things for our clients. Our sales team don't stretch the truth. And it's amazing how when you set the bar or set the standard for those type of conversations, how that just flows down and permeates across the board. Yeah. So I think it's pretty darn important.
It is, and I think you got to be good stewards. I think as you become a leader in a larger organization, being a good steward of that, right? Basically encouraging people that are doing the right things, and then basically stamping it out when you see where it's not going. And I think I would say my journey at Concur, that's probably one of the key elements of our success and adding more and more people, that like you had to be a steward. Everybody had to be a steward of it. And if it didn't happen, you had to wash people out pretty quick.
Right. And that was probably something I learned, is I was not quick enough to wash people out in the beginning. Definitely something to learn is you kind of thought, oh, maybe it's just me, and you question it. And then as time goes on, you recognize, oh my goodness, this is just not. And the flip side, it's not good for that person either. If they're not a fit for there, and then you see them flourish somewhere else, it's not because you were bad or they were bad. It's just that it wasn't the right fit. And that's usually where it ends.
Well, kind of pivoting, it's like I always think of entrepreneurs when they come to us, they're either kind of fitting into kind of one of three categories. They're either kind of strong or have a natural inclination in sales, product, or technical. And so, your background's kind of interesting, where you maybe had more of a technical engineering bent, but like you basically quickly went through like finance, and you went through operations, and then you went through sales. And so at this point in time, like what would you say your like core skill set looked like? I mean, do you think that really sales was kind of the one that you led with, or it was more kind of operational and how systems worked?
I still can't fit into one of those. I have to do all three. It works because I'm sure I've missed out on some opportunities because I've been too analytical, and but it allows me at this stage of my life, I'm going to be 50 pretty soon here, and it allows me to take a step back and say, okay, where's this product going? What are my margins, and what is going to look like? Can I have enough sales conversations to clarify and confirm there's likely going to be a product market fit? And I can iterate through those conversations in my head a lot of times before I get too far down a path. And that's allowed me to invest and better. I still need to do a better job there to mentor, improve my mentorship, and work with different groups. And then with OK to Charge, my company today, look at that. And even now, looking at different business models, growing it. That's the thing about an entrepreneur. If you think you have a great idea, wait until you start building your company. And right. I mean, you've been there so many times. You have to pivot, you have to change, and you have to do it intelligently and pragmatically, and take what the world gives you. And there's very few people that can bend the world to their will. And I think even those people, it probably didn't really bend. It probably just evolved into their will. But that's why we hear about them.
Honestly, Eric, I would actually pull this back to maybe your education in School of Mines and engineering in general.
Yes.
I think that there's a pragmatic set of skills that like I think School of Mines gave to us about like just problem solving, right? And so I think you had to have a reasonable acumen, you had to be somewhat intelligent, you had to work hard, but I think this kind of methodical approach of like breaking down large problems into small problems, and if some of it happens to be in finance, if some of it happens to be in operations, if it's something in product, or if it's in a sales process, what are you doing? You're taking a system and you're breaking it down and you're solving it. And so I think that probably is a foundation that probably enabled you to continue to collect skills on top of that. But I do think that's a foundational element that I think served probably both of us well.
You're absolutely right. That we already came to School of Mines because we knew we were smart in our school, in our smaller ponds, and then you go to School of Mines in this bigger pond, and you're just surrounded by all these super smart people, and then you kind of find your way. And even at Mines, I didn't thrive until I learned to study with a group. It sounds kind of silly, but I was kind of like doing it on my own. And I was at Delta Sigma Phi in the fraternity as an electrical engineer. I think I was probably one of the only ones. So it's kind of like I was on my own trying to figure these things out until then I became a study group. And then, wow, lo and behold, Dean's List, it's like but it took collaboration. It took that
Yep.
continued curiosity, and then back to your point, that foundational element of just figuring it out. That's something else about School Minds is that there's not much coddling involved. It's it's kind of a, oh, you don't get that, huh? Well, better figure it out. It's, no one's like, hey, Dr. Simonson, well, I can't figure this out. Could you help me? He's not there to coddle you. Here's what the problem is. Let me help you figure it out, and then move on. Right.
The second piece to it, which I don't think came from your education, that I think is important in these companies, especially for something you went through a scale, is how do you apply that kind of analytic nature and then basically deal with people, right? I think you see people, lots of smart people that know the answer, but I think the ability to kind of mold and figure out what type of talent you need, and then the ability to get the most out of them, I think is a skill set that like all CEOs or all founders need to kind of invest in. What's your experience on that side of it? Because it's one thing to know what the path is, but it's like, you're not doing all the work. You got to hire people to get work done.
Exactly. It kind of going back to School Minds as well, as I played football there. And some people don't know, but when I busted up my knee, I even played in the band for the year, So I really did. Yeah. You would not see that one coming. Yeah, exactly. And then I did student government, participated in there, and just really active. And I was always a leader in high school in different activities. And then I kind of took a couple of years off of that mindset in college at Minds. And then I became reengaged. And the education plus those leadership skills have really transcended well into the entrepreneurial world. So I was very happy about that, about how, just kept engaged. But you're right. You have to lead, you have to inspire, and you have to feel and read the room as well about what does it feel like? Especially when you're speaking at different groups. And, one of the companies I managed was in San Antonio, Texas. I'm down there every other week. I had a team in an office, and we had to go from 22 employees, and I had to cut it down to about 12 employees. So trying to manage that environment and rally the troops and share the right mindset so that you can grow. So 100%.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit, like you sold that last business to RealPage and you were there for about a year and a half. And so maybe talk to me a little bit about the difference from, running your own shop and, I don't know how many employees, 50 odd number of employees, and then going to this larger organization. Skill sets are different, right? Control is different. And, a year and a half is not chump change in that type of environment. So tell me what worked, what didn't. Was it difficult?
Yeah, definitely difficult, very difficult, different challenge. You go from the startup world where it's kind of an us versus the world type mentality. And if it's not working this way, let's figure it out. Whereas once you've sold your company to a different group, like a RealPage, large public company at the time, and I was fortunate enough to initially, actually, I'll kind of talk through that journey. Even selling the company, my initial job was to lead the division that we sold, which continued doing my day job. And it was, hey, can we keep 67% of our clients engaged in the next 3 months? And I was able to hit about 72%. So I was able to do that. And then I was able to get another opportunity to manage about 4 other divisions. And that's when I became president of one of the divisions. That was after probably about 9 months. So within about 9 months, I was able to earn the trust of the CEO by sitting down and having very frank conversations. That was nice out of the gate because I was able to continue to be who I was, and you get in these meetings where they do these product control meetings and you sit, and I always sit right next to the CEO. So if he wanted to ask a tough question, I was there ready to answer it. So I thought that was the right thing to do, and continued on to the very end, which is why I think he bought my second company too, because he always knew I was bringing the real deal. But the difference was that this is the tough part about large corporations is, I'll use the word politics because it's the best thing I can think of, is that it's not as much you versus the world. It's you versus other divisions, other groups, because you're fighting for funding. Some people are worried about the newcomer coming in, and there's politics, a little bit of Game of Thrones action, who's next in line, who's got this opportunity. So you have to be more wary. I became weary, but you have to be wary of all these different groups that you're I guess battling, for lack of a better term, on a daily basis, and it really does take up resources and brain time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Unfortunately.
I think the way I describe it from my time at Concur was I got away from the work that I enjoyed doing, right? It was,
Yeah.
like you're protecting your teams, you're doing a lot of budget, you're
Yeah.
doing a lot of HR, there's a lot of
Yes.
politics,
Mm-hmm.
and you got away from just building and shipping product
Right.
and stuff. And so I think it goes from pretty black and white in a startup world to kind of a lot of
Mm-hmm.
gray. And
Yes.
it's a different set of
Exactly.
skills, and
It
people are
is.
successful in that.
Oh yeah.
But I definitely reached my peak at one point in time too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. It's not good or bad. It's different
Right. Yeah.
because obviously at a company of that size, when you're pushing hundreds of millions in revenue, you can't run that same way. Yeah, and
Nope.
you want to. And I was able to. I guess I felt more about that mindset and muscle at Inhabit where I was previously, where you're looking at, hey, we can't build all the cool things that we need to do. We can only have so many resources and allocated funds, and we have other investors and in RealPage's case, public investors that need to have that return on investment, and you have to figure that out. And that's to your point about the budgetary process. While you get really savvy at your financials pretty darn quick about
Yeah.
where to manage and where to move resources.
Yeah. So after that, you joined eSupply Systems,
That's
and
right.
this was like an existing company that needed some turnaround help. So, that's
Hmm.
again kind of a different skill set than building something.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about how that opportunity came about, and then B, just like what that was like. I mean, I'm assuming there's a lot of cost and operational efficiencies, some things you've
Yeah.
done in the past, and then, but and again, this was another one that you sold to RealPage, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a good exit for the investors. Main reason is well, I was exposed to the opportunity through a couple common friends that I've met in the apartment industry. Mutual appreciation, respect. But then they introduced me to one of the investors was more this Red McCombs funded group called Fraser McCombs. And I, of course, loved McCombs coming from the Midwest, being a previous owner of the Vikings and the Denver Nuggets, and just remember seeing him thinking, how cool would that be? And then you go down to Texas and you talk to these guys, and they're doing everything from water rights to land in Montana where they make money off of the wells and the mineral rights and air rights and everything else. It's just unbelievable what these intelligent people can figure out. So I wanted to be a piece of that, part of that action, and it was really really fun to get to. So I had that small piece of that business going there, and it really wasn't supposed to be a turnaround. They thought it was this rocket ship that just needed the right guy.
More
Maybe that was a
fuel.
sales pitch. Yeah, just needed the fuel. Oh, with your Rolodex, Eric, it's going to be so easy. And I get in there, and because I think I'm that product guy and sales and market and everything, I go in and I look at and I talk to a few clients, and I'd say, okay, what do you love about this product? They'd say, I kind of bought it because this previous sales guy liked him, so I kind of bought some
That's
of it.
not
And I would
good.
say, it's not good at all. No, but I would find out that they wouldn't roll out the whole. They would buy it for maybe 5 or 6 for their properties, maybe in most business sense, maybe about 5%, 6% of their portfolio, just to be nice guys. And once I saw I hope the guy doesn't listen to this podcast, but maybe he does. But I saw his expense reports and I saw why they bought from him. The bar bills this guy put up in golf and everything else. I mean, my goodness, it would have been better just to buy the license himself. But so he was no longer with us, after that. But it made it pretty apparent to me that the product was not what it needed to be. So sat down, took a step back, and also brought in a little bit more money from investors, but looked at the time horizon. And this is the time value of money and how much time I can have with these resources. And I had to make some tough decisions, which I thought I would left that behind at the corporate world, but I had to do that here as well, saying, "Oh my goodness, this is not what I thought it was going to be." But you know what? I'm signed up. I like these guys. They trusted me. I have to do the job, and I reduced the staff count, changed the business model a little bit to be more inexpensive but more scalable, and able to get up to profitability where we're losing 100K a month to get it to profitable, just really barely over break even, and then flip that to RealPage again, and got the investors their money back, and then a nice little return, which made them quite happy, and some of them invested in the last couple of companies as well. So, and then to your point, sold to Steve Wynn by talking to him and him saying, yep, this is great. This will be a nice addition. And last time I checked in, it's over $100 million business for them right now.
Wow.
So the team did really well, and I felt really great. My favorite thing was about some of the team members, even though I just did the transition, but knowing that up front, being honest in the sales process, some of those team members took on some very high leadership roles. One of the gals, Dana, did an amazing job. She was leading that division up until recent, and I pulled her over to inhabit, and now she's the GM over there. But it kind of goes back to this culture. You get people that you work with, that you trust, are quality, and then you bring them along for the ride, ethically and within all the legal bounds, which I of course waited until those times have expired. So I think, seeing that, a couple of things is it's being upfront about the sales process, saying what your expectations are. There's no surprises, and then everyone can win if it's a true value add on all sides.
Sure. So what you didn't really mention in there was product.
Yeah.
You were saying that they were kind of, doing it as a nice guy. Do you think there was just there wasn't a product market fit? Do you think there wasn't a lot of customer discovery to really nail the solution? And basically that was part of what they ended up doing, and then aligning it, both from a cost perspective. Was there a lot of functional stuff that they had to do to make that work?
Great insight there again. The product, it was something the market needed. So picture like an Amazon.com, but you restrict all the products down to a limited set at a property for like refrigerator or paint, or like Sherwin-Williams is a big partner, or your carpeting, and we could restrict that down so a maintenance tech would just go and click and drop down and choose the ones that he or she wanted for that property. They didn't have to think about it. That was nice. So Great solution, very much needed. The problem is you didn't have many property managers that wanted to pay $1, $2 a unit for that right to have restricted information. They didn't see the value enough. So that was an issue. Also, the setup was very time intensive. Going down to what type of batteries do you want, or what? It was just so many SKUs. So it was not a scalable platform. So I think it goes back to great product, great idea, not scalable. The price was not a market fit. But the product was a fit. It's just, if you're going to give it away, great. Works for Silicon Valley guys, but not for sorry, it works for, it works in that vein, but it doesn't work in a mindset where you need to be profitable and have a great revenue stream. So that didn't really fly. And that's where what I did is I spoke to enough of these vendors, and I saw that they were paying us money just to have our restricted list. So I could say, okay, this property is a Sherwin-Williams property. And then I would keep out all the other paint shops. And then we'd have, this is where one of our team members would go through and say, oh my goodness, you use this paint from Home Depot and this and this. If you would just consolidate, you're going to save yourselves $10,000 a year. Oh my goodness, no brainer. And Sherwin gets more. So give us a cut of the action. So we flipped it around and said, we'll give this to you for free. And we focus on the big four, carpeting, paint. And that's when it changed.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool insight, right? Because basically the business model was wrong, is basically what it was in that. The product was right, the business model was wrong. And so, that happens a lot, right? I think you come up with the idea, the value proposition should be there, but it's the right person isn't the one paying. So
exactly. That's right. You can sell yourself on any idea. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. So then after that, you did Apartment Jet, and that's, you and I spent a little time on this one. I think that the concept was kind of interesting. So maybe you talk a little bit about this and the timing, because I think you did this and you built this before COVID and you sold it before COVID.
That's right.
In a lot of ways, man, like that stroke of luck was super good, because if you had continued that and done that through COVID, the story may have been very, very different.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a couple of unicorns, $1 billion plus companies that are no longer around or went under during COVID for exactly that reason. They kept on going. And so I was running East Supply Systems. I was starting to go through the process of selling the company, and was at one of our conferences and heard these executives on a panel, and it was about what to do about Airbnb. And the brilliant guy up there from Airbnb, Harvard MBA, trying to say the right things, but saying all the wrong things. Like, hey, isn't it awesome that your residents can list on Airbnb? Isn't that great? They're like, and how does that profit us? It's like, no, we're making zero money and we're getting more and more wear and tear and everybody hates it. And he's like, but think about your residents. Like, are you just leave now? And he totally missed the mark. So I kept on seeing that, and I'll never forget the day I put the RealPage poster, the in the booth. We sold the NEA in San Francisco, so the marketing team from RealPage walked over, put up. We literally signed the docs that morning with Steve Wynn. Pulls up the banner, puts in now a RealPage company. And that afternoon, I was in the Court Furniture office or in their booth saying, okay, tell me about how it works to move furniture around. Because my initial thought was that, whenever there's a vacant unit, we just put furniture in there, rent it out until it was rented. And they said, are you kidding me, Eric? Have you ever heard of bed bugs? I'm like, well, I kind of like, yeah, every time we have to move furniture out, we have to take it to a warehouse. We have to process it with chemicals and kill all the bugs and then send it back. That's not going to work. I'm like, okay. So all these little things, that's where it's that product market, sales, everything mindset going into it. And then I just start doing the numbers. But eventually partnered with TransUnion for background checks. And that's through talking to these execs saying, what do you need to feel comfortable with that? And that's where it really built up momentum, built up that platform, kept it really small and light, raised a little bit of money. Network Ventures, and others, as appreciate that. It's up to you if you want to share that or not. Exactly.
I was an investor in that one. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Good.
Todd was part, and I was very happy with that. So hopefully he was too. Good. Yeah. So appreciate the validation. And brought in just one round of investors, found them first in Chicago, and got them on board as a lead, Network Ventures with Jeff Maters and team, and kept it really small. I mean, we were even out of a WeWork initially, and in Chicago was a group called 1871 as well. Built it up, started to get some larger clients, and started to get our revenue cranking. And then we started to have conversations as far as our integrations with Airbnb and Vrbo, and not quite Booking.com yet. But it was fascinating because there's actually a guy out of Minnesota who comes down to our offices in Chicago, and he's with Vrbo, and it just friendly chatting around. It was really the biz dev guy, and we didn't know at the time. We thought it was more of a partnerships. But what they were seeing was that our average daily rent on our multifamily units were getting probably 2 to 2.5x of what they were receiving on their vacation bookings, because these are in Chicago, Nashville, Austin, great downtown city places.
Yep.
Yeah, great locations, getting a ton of money and a ton of occupancy too. I mean, we're talking 70, 80%, just unheard of numbers for these guys. And they start seeing this going, man, this is going to be huge. Yep. And what we didn't know is they had already begun conversations with a quote unquote competitor of us called Pillow that was helping the residents list their units. They were not getting the financial transactions as much, but so in Pillow's model of that resident, that was our phase 2, and we were already architecting that, and because we're pretty excited engineers and entrepreneurs, we're sharing it with this guy. This is our vision. And in his mind, he's going back to Seattle corporate and going, if we don't buy these guys, they're going to replace what we just bought, in like 6 months. And even worse, if Airbnb buys them after we make this move, it's really going to get ugly. So we're very fortunate. They came in and made a nice offer.
Time? I thought for some reason that
they did. No, they did.
Oh, okay.
They did buy the same. They were looking at them. Yeah. Sorry if I missed one, but they're looking at them, and then they bought us at exactly the same time. You were right. Yeah, within days. Yeah. The president or the CEO of Pillow and I were on a panel. It was Women in Asset Management for Greystar. It was like this big event, and he and I are on stage, and we both have these grins on our face because we're just, we know we have very big checks coming. Little did we know that it was us together. We're both picturing our names in the billboard at the Times Square, which we had to share. It's like, what? Really? I have to share this moment with this guy? Yeah, and he felt the same way. So. Exactly, right? Yeah, we're crying all the way to the bank, so not too bad. No one should feel bad for me. Yeah.
No, it was just a cool story, and the timing was just really good. And so
it was great.
And then, your time at Expedia was interesting too, because, I think, the market wasn't really there for both of your products. And so you had to add value while you were there. And then,
right.
And so maybe talk a little bit about your time at Expedia. Again, a larger organization, going from a startup to a large organization, different skills, run differently, a lot of competing, agendas. A lot of
Yes.
thin margin businesses in that one, which
Yeah.
is
Hmm.
difficult too. I mean, I knew it well from a
Yes.
travel perspective. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I'm just kind of interested from your standpoint on what that experience was like.
It was a night and day experience from RealPage. Where at RealPage, it was definitely a CEO led. Steve Wynn, everything had to go through Steve if you want to get something done. Whereas at Expedia, such a large group,
Much more
and this is
decentralized.
before, yeah, exactly, very decentralized. But also, unless your numbers were so massive, I was in a meeting one time, and I just can't even make this up. One of the executives leaned over and said, and it was about our business and Pill, and they just said, I don't even know why I'm in this meeting. This is like 0.5% of my business. What is the point? Like, I'm sitting right here. But that was his perspective. It's just like, why am I even in this meeting? Once he saw the numbers, and it was just so disheartening, and that
Yeah.
was tough to experience. You're going, okay, maybe I'm not so special now. And
Yeah.
that was tough to stay motivated in that environment, even though we're building something pretty cool, and they still need to compete with RealPage. I'm sorry, with Airbnb, and is now shut down and during COVID. And even then, I'm a persist type guy. So even during COVID, we completely retrofitted our platform so that we could support nurses and first responders. And the idea was that you would use our platform to book first responders and such, because New York City was the first place that was getting really hit hard by COVID. And we said, okay, you can use our platform, whether not multifamily, but you use it for the hotels, because no one was staying in hotels for business. And we built that. We could do our background checks and do all this validation stuff. And it was just one of those things. Someone just said, it doesn't matter. And just, we couldn't get our brains around the point that we're so small to matter, and
Yeah.
that we're like, everything matters. But then from the flip side, when you're that big, yeah, when you're billions of dollars, and you have Clinton's on your advisory board and your
Word.
board of
Yeah.
directors,
Yeah.
that you don't worry about tens of millions of dollars. You're worried about hundreds of millions and billions of transactions. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a couple of things there. I think I agree with you. Like, I think even at Concur, it's like when we were coming up with new product ideas, if it didn't generate $100 billion or $100 million in 5 years, you're kind of like, okay, is
Mm-hmm.
this worth investing in? And so that is
Yeah,
definitely a different way to think about it. I mean, you have a
it is.
massive distribution channel, so product
Right.
matters, and so it's different. The second piece I was thinking about was like, I mean, do you think that the product actually has a home? Like, do you feel like even today, like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they're doing with it, but do you think it ever
Yeah.
gets resurrected? And does this problem need to get solved, or it's just not big enough for them to go do something about?
A lot of those things. It's not resurrected at Expedia right now, and I don't see it becoming resurrected. It's because you'd have to take the code base and put all the resources behind it as well. I don't see that happening. Is there a need for it in the marketplace? Absolutely. You're slowly starting to see more and more short-term rentals in the
Yeah.
multifamily space. You're seeing Airbnb had 18% of their bookings in the last quarter are greater than 30 days. So you're seeing
Yeah.
actually the short-term rentals come into longer-term
Longer
rentals.
term rentals.
And
Yeah.
there's some of my friends, Zumper in San Francisco. They now list short-term rentals on their multifamily site. So now you're seeing multifamily go in there, and there's different concepts. Uh, my daughter just graduated from Berkeley, so my wife and I are going to go stay at a property in downtown San Francisco. It's got 16 units, and it's basically a hoteling type concept. No,
Yeah.
not one front agent or anything. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
So that's definitely happening. So there's definitely opportunities there. And as more and more platforms are being automated, automatic keys, locks, store locks, everything else, thermostats, and you just need a cleaning crew, it's going to become more and more commonplace. So I think it's definitely there, and I always consider resurrecting it. I just don't like doing old ideas. I like new things,
Yeah. Yeah.
but still
Yeah.
could happen. Maybe I'll advise somebody that does it.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
let's keep going. So
Yeah,
after
please.
you finished that one, you went to Inhabit, and were
I
they were
did.
kind of like a private equity group? Is that what they were? Or
Definitely.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay, yeah,
massive private equity. I began talking to them while I was at Expedia, even before the pandemic hit, and just because it's such an exciting opportunity, and
yeah,
it's taken all these multifamily assets that they rolled together under one umbrella, and these vacation industry assets under one umbrella. We're talking about 30 plus companies that have been brought under. The first was Providence, put in some equity. some cash, and then you had Insight Partners, and then just before, kind of, I think it was probably like a precedence of me joining, was Goldman Sachs put in money as well. Was one of the last investors. So Goldman Sachs hit, and then I started, and actually their check didn't hit. Let me clarify that, until after I had started.
They're so just waiting on you, huh?
Yeah, maybe. Just throwing it out there. Kind of a big deal. No. No. But it was cool, though. It was good to see. I mean, they were, some of it was part of me joining because they had to get a leader with the space, because a lot of the leaders that they had did not have multifamily or experience. And I had the multifamily experience from RealPage. I had the vacation from Expedia. There's frankly not too many people in the world that have unique background. So it was a fit. And it was very exciting to go in. My intention was to come in, as his chief strategy officer, and then become CEO and take the company public. But it wasn't quite the case after I got in the door, and some things were, not the way I expected them to be. But it was still very exciting to work with these different groups and organizations. I start with the vacation team, getting them aligned, getting some structures put in place, some sales momentum. Things such as, entrepreneurs forget about is you actually can do price increases. And it was pretty wild, on the flip side now, how painful that is. But we're able to create significant revenue from these groups that hadn't done a price increase for probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years. We're not talking egregious. I'm talking like 5%. And then also just doing right sizes with contracts and saying, hey, you know what? Sure, that was your uncle's cousin that had a property and he wanted a free one or whatever. No, we're going to pay at least $10, or something minimal. But that was really impactful to create kind of like a 30% revenue uplift. And that was pure EBITDA as well, which is the most fun thing, without having to add any headcount, just execution. Yeah. So then I grabbed the residential piece and continue to see growth within Inhabit. And just kept on building up those teams. So it's pretty enjoyable, and brought some really good people in as well that are still there.
Yeah. That price elasticity thing is kind of interesting, because I think a lot of startups go through this, right? They basically beg, borrow, and steal to get you to get on to start with, right? And so they discount their price just to get them on, and then you're getting larger corporations, you'll discount. But then once you get to a point where it's like, okay, you've renewed for 3-5 years or whatever, we've got some elasticity in that model where you're getting value out of it, and so get you back to what market value. Look at what your new deals are doing, and basically close that gap. And so we've gone through, just even in my consulting stuff, a handful of customers, exactly the same thing.
Yes.
Once you start getting some market brand, then you have a lot more probably leverage than you think you do.
Right. Spot on. And you just nailed it. The word is market value, right? You do comp to comp, and you say, hey, if you were to leave today, you're going to pay probably double or triple. So how about we just go up like half of, I'll meet you in the middle of double. How about that? And which is a big uptick.
Yeah, and especially when it's like the change management cost is pretty high, right? Like I got to rip something else out and I got to go back in. So like, maybe not like it, but I think it's a good point.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think a lot of entrepreneurs overlook that.
So absolutely.
So maybe let's talk a little bit about your current stop, OK to Charge. So I think you're taking an EV kind of trend that's happening with multifamily, and so it's exciting where it's something that you know well, and then a space that's growing in the right direction with a long tail on it. And so tell me a little bit about that opportunity and what drove you to that.
Yeah, so I'm at Inhabit. I'm walking the conference floor because I'm always looking for acquisitions. And I meet these guys that are doing access control. And almost in the corner of their booth, they have this charger, this EV charger. And I'm an electrical engineer. I drive a Tesla. I'm like, okay, tell me more about this. And they come to find out, they're like, oh, we do access control. And we had our client in Hilton Head, high net worth individual, puts in an EV charger, and then starts to realize that when he's gone, his electrical bill just keeps on going up higher and higher. A local Uber driver driving his Tesla 3 charged his vehicle and he's gone. Like, what? That happens? And they're going, hey, could you guys help me out and like restrict this thing? It's like, it kind of makes sense, right? You're like, what the heck? Because, they put their charger outdoors. They don't have garages. They're on stilts or whatever the heck these things are.
Yep.
So they build access control and start putting in some financing. And I met them like, this is going to be huge. No one's thought of it this way. Like multifamily, I'm saying you can restrict access in multifamily because right now they have these RFID cards they hand out, or you pay by credit card, or it's just free. a lot of these places. So we're already like a step ahead of everyone else. So left Inhabit and joined OK to Charge, partner with these gentlemen, building this platform up. They had kind of the technology. I brought the business model on top, annual subscription, and then a revenue share component of it. Really make minimal margin in the hardware because we don't make the hardware. Yeah. We're using, and now we're hardware agnostic, working with Siemens, ABB, NLX, Zrobo, all these different players, and really just building up a network of charging stations that are restricted to vacation owners, to multifamily. We have 2 of the NMHC top 25 as clients right now. Wow. And so pretty exciting, just starting to build up that muscle. We have a couple of hotel chains that have just started. Best Western added a few properties with us. And then all the way back to my Oracle days, Oracle Hospitality, working with them, landed a deal with Margaritaville in Panama City Beach, where they want to restrict. Yeah, it's pretty fun. And it's just, it's like I was sharing, before the call started, is that it's not taking off as much as I had hoped. But I think we're a lagging factor to EV sales. Mm-hmm. And Hertz and Enterprise, they already said by the end of next year, 25% of all their cars are going to be EV or be electric. Wow. So people go to, even the Black Hills, someone gets a car at the Hertz or Enterprise, where are they going to charge their car? They want to drive up to the Black Hills, park their car at their vacation property. And then what do? They start getting down to 25%. They start thinking, well, that's almost too late sometimes. Yeah. So that's where we're starting to get into that. It's a follow-on. And then the second thing that caught me off guard is how much the installation costs are, especially in these commercial properties. Anybody that's listening that doesn't know what they're going to do for college, go to be an electrician, because there's going to be so much need for that. These installation, pulling conduit, putting in, and there's going to be so much money. I'm working with Excel Energy. You probably know well out of the area. Yeah. And they're actually funding a lot of these projects just because they need to get that throughput going. So it's a very exciting time.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. I mean, this is a trend line that's going to go for a long time. You think about transmission lines. You think about there's all sorts of kind of ramifications to the whole kind of supply chain that needs to happen over time if this continues. Right. Yeah, pretty cool.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, good. Well, I was kind of wrapping up some of your career stuff. Like, if you've done a bunch of investment type of work too, and so it's kind of interesting as an investor if you've been an entrepreneur, because I think you have a tendency to look for certain things. And so I'm kind of curious from your perspective, are there 3 things that you look for in entrepreneurs, whether you're working with them, investing in them, partnering with them? Is there anything there that you've kind of seen that you think are repeatable patterns that you look for?
Yeah, it's mainly lessons learned, mistakes I made, and you always learn the best when you did something wrong or made a mistake. So probably the most important thing is kind of that old euphemism: bet on the jockey, not the horse. Bet on the person who's leading the enterprise, not the product. Don't fall in love with the concept of the product. It's more fall in love with the person, if at all, because they're the ones that you're going to work with. They're going to be pivoting, changing, working those concepts. And then it's that's the second part, or the first one. And the second one is kind of separate your passion projects from your investments, and make sure you know the difference. If you try to mix those, you get yourself in trouble too. Because if it's truly a passion project, you don't need a return. You're doing it because you enjoy it and you enjoy the people and the concepts. That's all good. And if you push them too hard, that's going to mess up the conversation. For investment, it's okay to say, where's your quarterly report? What's going on? Yeah. What's your plan? Where are you going next? And I think you're phenomenal at this, Todd. I actually envy your ability to dissect companies like this. I think you're outstanding at it. So it's a muscle I need to get better at. And then I think the third thing is be a participant and be a support. Don't try to drive these things and that because you don't live it day to day. Well, unless you are part of it day to day, that's kind of like the third part, is that it's so hard. You're probably like me. You'll have to dive in and get in, and then it's but at the same time you're going, okay, I'm going to disappear for another month, and they're going to be doing this day to day. It's hard. It's so hard. I'm still figuring that one out. So once you figure that out, let me know how to do that.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think you're right. I think the first one really resonates with me because I think even the stuff we're doing with Wildfire Labs, I think we just bet on the individual, right? The idea, if it's decent and interesting, that's great. But I think a lot of it is that's an entrepreneur I want in my ecosystem. That's an entrepreneur I want to work with. So product will pivot, business models will pivot, but the core individual doesn't. And so I think that one's really just resonates with me. So it's good. It's and I think your last one too is kind of interesting, where it's like figuring out where to participate, where to add value, and then making it so that you can have the flexibility to drop in, drop back out. I think that's not always easy, right? And especially for people like yourself, where it's like you're an operator, you understand what needs to go on, and it's like, and there's a fair amount of context to like add value in most cases, right? You need to learn a bunch of things to actually add value. Otherwise, you're just kind of giving these glib, high-level answers where they're kind of like, okay, I don't know, that was cool to have coffee with Eric, but no value there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's one of those things where, have you thought about? You're going. I have thought about that.
Yeah, because I do this every day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, EV charging. Have you thought about solar? It's kind of big. Throwing out there. You're like, thanks. It's great. Thanks. Add more value. Yeah, exactly. Love it.
That's good.
Well, I love what you're doing with Wildfire. I'm excited to continue to see it grow and what you're doing for Rapid City. It's great.
Yeah, it's a big audacious goal, but I think we're early shoots are looking pretty good. It'll be interesting to see how it continues to evolve. I think we've got a lot to learn. We've learned a lot in the last year, but it hasn't been boring, Eric. So that's good.
All right, great.
The last question I'd ask you is, and I close with this with everyone, is what's the kindest thing anybody's done for you? I think we talk about bits and bytes, and we talk about all these things, and it's kind of I don't know, it's a business, right? And I think at the end of the day, this is about people, and it always kind of brings me back. So I don't know if you have a story that you'd want to share that maybe resonates with this.
Yeah, I do. It was, I mentioned his name, but it was Larry Simonson a bit earlier. He would come to Chicago quite a bit, and I wasn't really involved in South Dakota School Mines in the beginning, and he'd come out and bring his jelly and things like that. But it was an early luncheon because I was doing the consulting project, and I had a chance seating arrangement. I sat down next to Randy Baker, who was president of Case IH at the time, another school mines grad. And it was fascinating to me to listen to his experiences about how he was an engineer, was in sales, was in product, and all these things led to his role where he's at. And then I asked him if I could follow up, and I just went up there and sat with him for about half a day, and he shared his mindset. And for me, that was really transformative in what I thought was possible. And that helped me to think about the engineering background. And you touched on earlier about solving problems, about applying it to all these concepts. And I think that's half the battle, coming from South Dakota. You can see where Harvard and Yale and everyone around them are senators and all these great opportunities and great roads to great fame, until you kind of see it and kind of shake someone's hand and know who they are and know that, hey, I could do that too. Yeah. It's difficult to see that vision until you've seen it up front. And I think that was a really big level of kindness to share that time and insight, and it was motivating for me.
Eric, I just want to thank you for taking the time today. This has been a great conversation. We certainly learned a lot and appreciate kind of you sharing all of your experiences. And really, I think there's a ton of things to take away from this. So thanks for taking the time.